Dad was born on the 2nd of June 1940 in Ely, Cambridgeshire.
His father was in the army, so they moved around a great deal.
He went to 17 different schools.
Let's start with Dad's sense of humour. I was remembering driving home the other day, the occasions at the Denmead Baptist Church harvest suppers where he would dress himself up as all sorts of different characters to perform. So I think there was one time that he and some of the other deacons dressed like the three maids in the Mikado and sang Three Little Maids from DBC.
And his sense of humour was something that didn't actually fade.
Yeah, we were trying to find, when his bed was delivered from the hospice and he was showing me how he could sit himself up and lower it, he was trying to find the ejector seat button. The family lived in Egypt for some time.
When they returned to England, he spent his most settled period of time at Churches College in Petersfield. Well, my holidays always started with getting ready to go on holiday.
Yes.
So there were a couple of key and important steps. One was Dad loading the trailer. We had this little green trailer that he'd made, and he had this real ability. Everything had its place, and he would pack the trailer, and everything went in a precise order.
Yes.
And then over the top, it got stacked at least this much higher than the trailer itself, roped down, and then he had his piece of plastic that went over the top, and it was all roped down. The thing is, as we went along, we'd see all these other families who tried, whose father had done exactly the same thing, and the plastic had blown off and the trailer was coming apart, or it had all shifted. I don't remember that ever happening.
No.
It never moved.
No.
It was we'd get there, it was all in exactly the same place.
And then, of course, when we arrived on holiday, we'd all have our own jobs to do to put the tent up. And you'd occasionally be allowed to peg.
I'd be allowed to, as I got older, I was allowed to put some pegs in, and then initially it was still while I was watching, they got pulled out and re-pegged, and later on, as I became a little more uppity about it, it was only when my back was turned and I'd come back round the corner and there he was busily re-pegging all the bits that I'd pegged down.
We had some great camping trips, didn't we?
We
really
did.
Good fun.
Yes. In the days that swimming trunks were tight.
Oh, Dad's pair were legendary, weren't
tight
they?
And stripy.
Yeah, red, orange, yellow, stripes.
Stripes.
Very
and
tight.
Yes. Yeah, thank goodness those days have passed.
Another strong memory is sitting around the table in the tent that was always called Anna Marie.
Yes.
And playing hours of what?
Of what, yes. But then the other thing that Dad was never parted from on holiday was his binoculars.
Yes.
Different sets over time, but he always had a pair of binoculars and he'd be sat on the beach.
He'd often bird watch.
Yes, bird watch.
And boat watch.
And boat watch, and he'd be sat on the beach and we'd be told what boats were going in and out and so on. But there was that time that he got into just a little bit of trouble.
A great deal of trouble.
Where we were sat, I think it was Sandbanks.
It was.
And we were sat on the beach and we noticed him, the binoculars moving a little faster than usual.
They would just start to move along the beach.
Follow along.
Yes,
and we thought,
would.
well, what's Dad found to be watching? And there was this topless lady walking along. He got into a lot of trouble for that one. And we didn't allow him to forget it.
No, we didn't. In fact, to be fair, we didn't often allow him to forget much.
No, because
Sandbanks was also a very, very famous family story.
It was a very famous family story that he was never allowed to forget.
Including only a week ago.
Yes,
that
we were
reminding him.
We were, yes.
Of this occasion. So walking along all the way from Sandbanks to Bournemouth, with Dad having convinced us that when we got to the other end there would be a bus that we could catch back. And of course when we got there it was to see the last bus of the night driving away. And after having had a pile of fish and chips on the beach, we then had a very long walk all the way back to the car.
By which point it was dark.
It was dark and it was soft sand and we were trudging, weren't we?
We were.
Through the soft sand. And so to keep us entertained, Mum made up a song about, I wish I'd been a Bournemouth yellow bus. If I was a Bournemouth yellow bus, I'd come along and pick up us. I wish I was a Bournemouth yellow bus. And I mean, I've lost count of the number of times we've sung that to Dad.
Well, he got, to be fair, he did get it sung at him for about an hour and a half that night.
He did, yes.
By which point he was ready to throttle us.
He was.
But then it did get sung most holidays and special occasions.
In fact, my children know that song. He left school and joined the police force.
After that, he was a manager at Halfords in Southsea, where he met Mum.
He became a Christian and was baptised in November 1969.
Mum and Dad married in February 1970. And of course, he had the joy and privilege of teaching us both to drive.
Yes, he did. Was he more successful teaching you than he was me?
Well, because I'm obviously a far better driver even now, so yes, clearly. But I learnt to drive in a field at church camp when I was about, I don't know, 13,
probably
13, 14, something like that. So I learnt to drive in a grassy field.
That was probably a better way of learning to drive than my experience.
Yes. You put a few grey hairs on his head that day, didn't you?
I did, yes, when I put it in the ditch. Had he explained, though, that it wasn't like a motorbike and that wasn't full lock, I might not have put it in the ditch when he told me to turn it round.
Might
not, no.
But yes, and a procession of cars, of course. So talking about learning to drive or a subject of cars. We had a procession of cars.
We did.
While we were younger, mainly
Cortinas.
We had a Cortinas, that's the first one I remember, and then a variety of Fiats, Renaults, and Citroens, and then he got his pride and joy with the nearly new Mondeo.
Yes.
That lasted for a number of years. But yes, a procession of cars, and of course the first thing that happened after he bought the car was a trip to Halfords to buy the Haynes manual.
To
try and keep it going for as many years as possible. So that manual was always very well thumbed by the time the car departed.
But then he didn't just keep cars on the road, did he? So his experience of being a manager at Halfords certainly helped us as we were growing up, as our bikes would be tweaked and sorted and so on.
Just kept going when we were using them every day to ride to and from school. He'd be able to keep that bike going and keep it.
He would. And he's done the same for our children since then, hasn't he? The number of times he's raised saddles and sorted stuck gears and
mended punctures.
And mended puncture after puncture after puncture. Shortly afterwards, Dad joined Lloyds Bank.
I came along in 1971, followed by my sister in 1973.
But the guinea pigs, I think he had probably the softest spot for guinea pigs, didn't he?
Because he built my first guinea pig hutch when I was little. He built that hutch. Yes, built that hutch from scratch, so he built that one.
And then, of course, living here, when our guinea pigs were living free range, and they were living on the bank outside the back door, and Dad would go out for ages chatting with them and getting them to come up and take things from him. And Dad worked for many years in Lloyds Bank, but then in the year 2000 he and his team were made redundant. At that point he started working for a charity who arranged transport for adults with learning difficulties.
The other big thing that Mum and Dad did together, their shared ministry, was Wednesday Club.
Yes.
Which ran for years and years at the Baptist Church in Denmead.
Mum and I were trying to work out how long, and we think somewhere between 10 and 15 years. And for many of those years, over 100 children a week would come to Wednesday Club.
And whilst Mum might have been the more public teaching face of it, Dad was very much...
That was all the organisation.
A core part of the...
Ran the tuck shop and organised the games and activities that they did.
And then once Wednesday Club days were over, they had the youth back at the house.
Over the youth group, didn't they,
on the Sunday night, and had the youth at their house for years and years again.
Back with the crocodile.
Yeah.
But and shuffleboard. And
all those young people that will have, he'll have had played a part with over those years.
Dad eventually retired in 2005, and together we bought Station House moving permanently here to Somerset in July of 2006.
And then, of course, there was the move here. Having spent all those years in Denmead,
Yeah.
making the move down to Somerset and move down to Vencross, and particularly the station and his sort of shared interests. I mean, well, we were growing up, we haven't talked about it, but you had model railways.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah, Dad was a
Hornby, yes.
keen model railwayer. I'm not sure that was for my benefit or his, or both. Both,
Probably
I
a bit
think.
of both, yes.
But then I think coming down here and moving to the house with the railway connection, he had that shared interest in the gardening, but also all the railway history that was part of it. And I think that was an ideal combination for him.
As well as the real love of a chainsaw.
Oh yes, a chance to use a chainsaw. yes, boys and their toys.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, the transformation that between them they've made here has just been incredible.
Yes.
And although Mum's had the knowledge and the expertise from the horticultural side, without Dad's practical, physical doing of things, that could never have been realised. They were an amazing team together.
Yes. Dad enjoyed many years of really good health, only becoming ill in July of this year. So it's been a really swift decline, and we're very grateful that he had so many active years. Another thing is the pride in his grandchildren as they were able to start to do stuff. He's shown it with all of them. That I'm sure you can come up with some examples, but one I remember was when Isaac started to be able to use the ride on mower to mow the lawn. He was so proud that he'd passed that on, that he was passing that on to someone else.
So any time Sam came home with a new car, either one that was his or one that he'd had from work, Dad was the first one out there wanting to see what it was and what does it do and you know, how fast does it go and so on.
My greatest memory of Grandad was how funny he was, and no matter what situation we were in, he could always see the funny side of things and always could crack a joke, normally at Grandma's expense. And also that he was a shark at anything he picked up to do with cards, so especially Uno around Christmas time, and how he would take great pleasure in dishing out all the nasty cards and winning every round.
The thing I most admire about Grandad is how, no matter what his age was, he would continue to do all jobs around the house. He'd manage a garden, help his wife, fix mine and my family's stuff when it broke, like my bike, all of our bikes, and he just wouldn't stop at the age you'd think. Many people would have. He just kept on going, which is really admirable. And it teaches people that you shouldn't just give up, no matter what your age is, but continue, because you only have one life, and that's it.
It was lovely having Grandad living next door.
Thank you for Trump. I'll always remember you, Grandad. I love you, Grandad. I hope you can see a light from heaven, Grandad.